Okay, so now before I get into modeling here, I want to take care of a few scene setup things, mainly being some settings on my camera. Now, I can access my camera just by coming up to my viewport and clicking this little camera icon right here, right below lighting. So I can access my camera that way, and then I can go to my attribute editor and I can see all of my camera settings now. Now, if you're opening Maya for the first time or you haven't messed around with any of your settings, your near clip plane and far clip plane will be a little bit different than mine. I think by default it's 0.01 and your far clip plane is quite a bit less than that. It's important for you to go ahead and change these settings. So just change your near clip plane to 1 and your far clip plane to something like 100 million or a million is fine. And basically the reason we're doing this is just to show you really quick. I'll set this back to 0.01 and set this back to something like 1,000. Is we're building our scene to scale. And whenever you, let's actually do a sphere here. Whenever you have something to scale, so say for example, we're making our object fairly large here. So you'll see that right away when you zoom out, it will start to disappear. This is our far clip plane. So if we go back into our camera settings here and change our far clip plane to something like, just add quite a few zeros, then you'll notice that we can zoom out without our object disappearing. But then you'll see that this weird flickering thing happens, right? And that is actually our near clip plane. So if we change our near clip plane to 1, it will solve that issue. So that's the first thing that we want to take care of. The other thing that I like to change here is the focal length. I like to change this to 50 because that's a little bit more to what the human eye sees. Now you can choose to change your near and far clip plane every time that you open Maya if you want, but you can also change these settings in your preferences as well. So I just want to show you really quickly how to do that. So we're going to go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, and then go to Preferences. And then we're looking at the camera. So cameras here, and then you can change your near clip plane to 1 and your far clip plane to something crazy high, so you don't get that weird flickering artifacting happening, which will make things a little bit easier to look at when you're modeling. Now the other thing I want to take note of here is that if you go to settings, that your working units is set to centimeters. Now this is extremely important for working to scale. You do have the option to change this to inches or feet or yards. I would highly recommend that you just leave this at centimeters because if you change it to another unit, you'll have a little bit of an issue when you're going back and forth between other apps. So for example, say I had this set to feet or feet, and then I send my model into something like Unreal Engine. Well, Unreal Engine is still set to centimeters. So whenever I translate 5 feet, which is 5 units into Unreal Engine, weird things can happen. Like instead it can be just read as 5 centimeters instead of 5 feet. Anyway, long story short, just keep this at centimeters and just learn to work with centimeters. That's really your best option here. So I'm just going to leave that at centimeters. I'll click save, and then I'm just going to start over here, start with a new scene. And now we can actually get started modeling. Now, like I said, I like to model things and it's a good idea for you to model things as close to scale as possible when you're doing anything. Now, I don't mean you need to be down to, the millimeter, the centimeter, or even the inch, especially when you're just starting out, kind of just having fun with it like what we're doing today. It's not imperative that you model it exactly to scale, but I do want to get it sort of to scale. So kind of around the ballpark of the scale, of the right scale. And how I do that is I usually do something like make a cube about the size of a door. Now I know that typically a door is around 7 feet tall. And I know that a foot is about 30 centimeters. So that means if I come over here to my channel box and go to my inputs and my polycube there, that when I do a door, it's going to be 7 feet tall. 30 centimeters is a foot. So that's going to be around 180 centimeters, I believe. We can do the math easily by just bringing up a calculator here and saying 30 times 7 is 210. So I was way off. So we can do our height is 210. And then I'm just going to eyeball the width and thickness with my scale tool. So I'm just going to scale that out a little bit and make it somewhat thick. Right about the ratio of a door. And then that's kind of what I'm going to base my entire house off of, is the scale of this one door. So this this door here is my little door right over there. And you'll notice the size of it compared to the grid. So a lot of people, when they're just starting out, will just start working on the grid. Your grid's about 6 to 7 inches. It's not very big. So you don't want to just work based off the size of your grid. You want to have things somewhat to scale. So there's my door. When I'm just starting out modeling, I also like to have my wireframe on shaded view here. This will just make things a little bit easier to see whenever I click off of them. As you'll notice that we now have my wireframe here. So if I don't have that on, everything just kind of blends into the gray. But with that on, we can see the wireframe and we can see it a little bit nicer. So then I'm just going to start blocking out my house here. And this may or may not be final geometry for me. I may change the ratios or change the geometry of everything. But I do want it to be about just sitting kind of on top of the grid. And then I can just sort of scale things. And I'm just trying to get the bottom part of the house here. So I can go into my vertex mode and just move those vertices down to about where the door would be. And the door is going to be moved up a little bit because there is stairs going up there. So I'm going to move my door right about up here. I'm going to move my top part up a little bit. I think the width is all right. I think it's about good right there. So we have like a window, right? And then the space. So it's going to be something like that. And then the length here is going to be much longer. So something along the lines of that. And nothing is ever set in stone here. I can always change everything as I go. And at this moment, I'm just trying to block out the basic shape of my house. I'm not worried about, making final geometry or anything like that. And then for my roof, I'm actually going to extrude up. So I'm going to go to my face mode here, select my face. And then I'm going to extrude up just a little bit like that to kind of get that border that's right there. And then I'm going to extrude way up again and just scale in a little bit like that. And again, I'm just eyeballing it here. I'm not trying to get anything exact or precise. I'm just kind of measuring the distance. We have the door here, and this is probably 3 doors high. So I could really easily just take my door here and say, so 1, 2, 3. So that's about 3 doors high right there, maybe a little bit taller. And then the roof here does have a little bit of a slope or a curve to it. So to create that, what I'm going to do is use my multi-cut tool. Actually, let me switch to my mega shelf here. I'm going to use my multi-cut tool, and I'm going to hold down with my multi-cut tool. I'll hold down Control, and I'll insert an edge loop there. And then I'm going to select those vertices and just scale those in a teeny bit, something like that. And then I'm just going to repeat that sort of like halfway between those 2 points, halfway between these 2 points. And I'm only trying to scale them in this axis. And make sure I get, you could also just use the edge. So I could just double click that edge, and then I get that edge mode. So just something like that, just trying to get a rough shape of the house here. All right, so again, this doesn't have to be final geometry or anything. I'm just sort of trying to get the basic shape of the house blocked out. So that's it for like the main shape of the house. Again, the chimney, I'm not going to put the chimney there. Again, AI, when you're using AI, it doesn't think logically. So that's really not where a chimney would be. I think I'm going to make it where my chimney's on this part of the building right here. So let's get started making that section there. So again, I'm just going to start out with a basic cube. And I'm going to just sort of scale this cube to size, move it around, place it. Again, you can just eyeball it. Nothing needs to be precise at this point. We are just sort of eyeballing it. So it doesn't quite stick out that far, but I want this cube to be deep enough to where the roof will go all the way back into this section of the house. So maybe something like this. And I'm eventually going to move it way back in, but for now I'm just kind of leaving it out. And then we'll do our roof section here as well. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select that top face, hold down Shift, extrude up a little bit. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to instead, because I don't want to move where I'm at now. So instead I can just take my multi-cut tool and make another little edge loop right there around the same spot there. Again, not super important that you do this. We're just trying to block out the shapes. So then I'll extrude up again, maybe somewhere around here. It doesn't go all the way to the top of the roof. And scale that in like that. And now I'm seeing that this one, where this one's kind of concave, a curve where it kind of curves in, this one seems to like curve outward a little bit instead. So I'm going to kind of do the opposite of what I did to this roof to this roof. So I'll take my multi-cut tool, and right in the middle I'll make an edge loop. Go to edge mode, select that edge loop, and just scale that out a little bit. And then I'll do that sort of just like halfway in between those two as well. So like one here, and then I'm just trying to make like a nice smooth looking curve transition between those points. And now I can just grab that whole object and just sort of move that into place there. And that's sort of what I'm looking for. Now, again, this doesn't have to be final geometry by any means. This is just us blocking out our house. Again, that's not where the chimney is going. I'm probably not going to do this chimney, and I'm not going to do this back portion either. This is just doesn't, again, it's something that doesn't seem logical to me to have another addition to the house, like way back there in the back. So I'm going to leave that the way it is. And then we can kind of just block out our chimney from here. So I was going to kind of do the chimney right here, right, where it just kind of goes straight up. And then I can sort of do 2 windows on each side of the chimney. So just something like that. And I'm actually going to scale this out so it just sticks out a little bit further. Again, I'm not following this reference I'm using like to the T. I'm using a little bit of creative freedom here. So just something like that. Now, one thing I can do here to sort of clean up a little bit is just delete any faces that I'm not going to need or not going to see at any point. So these bottom 2 faces, I can delete these. And then the inside faces of this part of the house, I'm never going to see. So I can just go ahead and delete those as well. And that would just kind of keep things a little bit more clean. And now for the chimney, again, I'm just going to start with a cube. So I'm just going to create a cube and just sort of eyeball that to scale and into the correct position. So I do want it to kind of stick out a little bit, like there's sort of like an exterior fireplace, or that's kind of my idea anyway. So it's going to jut out like this. You can use that to bring that up a little bit. And then I'm just going to extrude this guy up and then maybe scale that in a little bit somewhere around here. And then I can just extrude that straight up. Something like that. I can go again to my multi-cut tool and add a little edge loop right there. And then I can select these surrounding faces and hit my extrude function. And then I'm just going to pull those straight out like that to get a little bit of that lip. Again, just sort of eyeballing things at this point. I actually kind of like the look of this one, where if we zoom in here, there's sort of 2 little edges going around, and then this one kind of like tapers out. So I can back up here, just hit undo, and instead of doing the way that I did it, I can I'll make 2 little edge loops there, 2 little edge loops there. I'll make one up here. And again, this doesn't have to be the final model. We are just sort of blocking things out so we can visually get an idea of what where things go. We're not guessing, right? We're not guessing for everything. So we're still very much just in like the planning phases here for this. So I have those. I will do an extrude and just extrude those out a little bit. Same thing, hit extrude, extrude that out a little bit. And then this top portion here, I can just grab and with my scale tool, for some reason my scale tool went away. There it is. I hit something that made my scale tool disappear, but it is back. And then I can just sort of scale that out. I'll grab this interior face here, extrude that inward. And then I can even extrude it down to get a little bit of an interior portion there to my chimney. But that's it. You know, I may end up replacing this chimney entirely, and that's okay. It's no big deal. But we have our sort of initial block out for our house. Next, we can probably start working on things like the cutouts or the holes for where the windows will go, and then move on from there.